The Bible functions as collective memory of the Israelites, created initially to explain, justify, and legitimize David's kingship. This represents what we call an apology, a common practice throughout history. Most kings obtained power through ruthless means, killing opponents, usurping thrones, eliminating rivals. Kingship requires ruthlessness, but ruthlessness creates legitimacy problems. Kings resolve this by sponsoring writings explaining why they rule. The answer always follows the same pattern: because God willed it, because circumstances forced their hand to save their people, to do God's work. They had no choice. They weren't ambitious. Violence was necessary despite their peaceful nature. Writing at this point was new technology, expensive technology. You needed rare materials and trained scribes capable of producing text. Supporting a team of scribes to create any work required significant resources. Writing functioned like movie making today, an expensive endeavor usually sponsored by kings to justify their rule and create legitimacy. The Bible was created first as apology for David, explaining why the house of David now controlled Israel. Eventually, the house of David and Israel divided into two nations. The house of David and the Bible went with Judah. The northern kingdom needed its own mythology, its own Bible. A second Bible was created. The priest class controlling biblical texts promoted their own interests, mainly the importance of ritual. Why do we need rituals? Why are priests important? People during Babylonian captivity looked back at Israel's history trying to understand why the house of David collapsed. Their answer: because Israelites refused following God's will, because they became polytheistic or immoral. The Bible at this point divided into four major factions or schools. The school supporting the house of David's legitimacy is called the J school. People supporting the northern kingdom as legitimate house of Israel formed the E school. The school supporting priestly power obviously became the P school. The school examining why Israel failed, believing Israelites betrayed God, comprised the D school. These represent just four major schools. Other schools existed as well. When Persians took over, they insisted on one religion, one document. All four were assembled together to create the Bible. They simply merged them without major editing or revisions. If you read the Bible, it follows a pattern like ABCD ABCD. One line comes from E school, next line from J school, another from P school. It's confusing to read. Without understanding this history, reading the Bible becomes impossible. It's not readable. Why would they do this? Why assemble all four texts together without editing? Most people didn't read or write then. The Bible itself didn't really matter. What mattered was oral explanation of Bible controlled by priest class. People didn't read the Bible. How it was written wasn't important. Priests needed access to the Bible. That's the first reason. The second more important reason: the Bible is political real estate, the most valuable political real estate in the world. Everyone wants to be in the Bible because being in the Bible gives legitimacy and power. If you're a king with four sons all wanting kingship, your best solution is dividing the kingdom among the four sons. Same with the Bible. You have four extremely powerful schools and factions. The best way to resolve the issue is putting everyone in the Bible together. Merging them proves easier than ordering them sequentially. This is crucial understanding. The Bible is the most valuable political real estate in the world. Everyone wants to be there. What ideas you can find there will ultimately shape human history. If you're discovering how power and narrative shape everything we believe about history and want to explore more hidden truths about ancient texts, please subscribe. We're revealing the mechanisms behind sacred stories most never question. Now let's continue with David's apology. When kings come to power, they face three major problems. First, legitimacy. What gives you the right to be king? Second, identity. This is huge for Israelites because they're a multicultural entity with people speaking different languages, practicing different cultures and religions. You need creating identity everyone accepts. Third, differentiation. You need these people to get along and divorce former culture. You have Egyptian priests there. You must tell these Egyptian priests they're now Israelites, not Egyptian anymore. Augustus Caesar and the writing of the Aeneid provides example. The Aeneid tells about character named Aeneas, providing political legitimacy to Augustus Caesar because Augustus Caesar is direct descendant of Aeneas, founder of Rome. The Aeneid said Augustus Caesar is the endpoint of Roman history. Everything before Augustus Caesar led to him. Augustus Caesar is the Jesus of Rome, the salvation, the redemption of Rome. Second thing about the Aeneid. It creates new Roman identity focusing on piety and loyalty over liberty. Romans didn't like kings. Now he's king. How do you get people to obey? You tell them piety is more important than liberty. Third idea, the Aeneid is anti-Greek. Greek culture was vastly superior to Roman culture. Many Romans were adopting Greek cultural practices like Mark Antony. The Aeneid said Greek culture is like the Trojan horse. If you let it into your city, Greek culture will corrupt you and destroy you. Every king must resolve all three issues: legitimacy, identity, and differentiation. That's what David is trying to do with the Bible. I'll give you 3 stories from the Bible illustrating David's quest for legitimacy. Now that David is king, many people don't think he's legitimate. Why? Because he ruthlessly tried to usurp the throne from Saul. Saul is the king everyone picked or elected. He was good king, good at war, someone most people liked. David stole the throne from him. Now what is David's problem now that he has throne? Others will try stealing it from him. If you set the precedent of stealing the throne, others are now empowered to steal the throne from you as well. The first thing the Bible does is show us David loved Saul. He was not at all ambitious. He cared only for well-being of his king. One story illustrates this. Saul thinks David's trying to kill him. He's chasing David with his army, trying to kill David and his followers. One day, Saul is alone in cave praying to God for deliverance. David sees Saul alone and sneaks up behind him. He takes his sword and cuts a piece of Saul's clothing. David disappears. Saul leaves the cave. David rushes to him and says, "Saul, my king, I beg of you. Give me a second. Let me explain. Back in the cave I could have killed you. This is piece of clothing proving I could have killed you, but I didn't because I love you, because I'm loyal to you. I would never kill you." Saul says, "This is proof you never meant to kill me." Obviously the story cannot be true. But this is what the Bible's trying to do. It's trying to show us David is not at all ambitious. The entire apology of David focuses on David's lack of ambition. That's the first story. The second story, Saul is dead and his son, a young man, comes into throne. There's a general named Abner. Abner was loyal to Saul, but now that Saul is dead and David is very popular among people, Abner sees political winds changing. Abner tries aligning himself with David. Abner writes long letter to David saying, "Listen, I will swear loyalty to you and will end civil war between house of Saul and house of David. You will unite Israel." David writes back, "Come to me. I'll give you a feast and we'll be friends." Abner comes, David gives him feast. As Abner leaves, he runs into David's general named Joab. Joab and Abner go a long way back. They were friends, they were enemies. Abner killed Joab's brother. In act of anger, Joab stabs Abner to death. Once Abner is dead, the house of Saul basically gives up and David is able to unite Israel. In the story, David is so angry that he curses Joab and gives Abner great funeral because David does not want to betray his friends. Why is this story wrong or completely made up? It's what we call spin. Clearly Abner and David had feast together and clearly Joab killed Abner. But the Bible version of this event can't be true. If you're David and you're king, which person in the world are you most afraid of? You should be suspicious of Joab because Joab has access to your army. Abner is your enemy, but Joab has access to your army. If Joab wants to betray you, he could. Because David is most suspicious of Joab. If Joab were ever to act independently, David would need to kill him. In this circumstance, Joab acted independently. David told Joab Abner was honored guest and Joab didn't care. He was angry about death of his brother and kills Abner. This cannot possibly be true. Joab had to kill Abner because he was ordered to by David. Why would David want Abner killed? Because in his mind he thinks if Abner can betray house of Saul, he can also betray house of David. He is an ambitious man. Why would David come to this conclusion? Because he himself is like that. He himself betrayed Saul. So he's very careful about people who betray their leaders. Abner betrayed House of Saul, and it was very likely he would betray David at some point. David had to have him killed. But he could not say this publicly, because if you were to say this publicly, it would show he knew this because he betrayed Saul. You can see how wonderful the spin is. It's almost impossible to see truth from this. We're getting to the most revealing story, and if this is opening your eyes to how narratives shape power and history, I'd appreciate your subscription. We're deconstructing sacred texts to reveal the political machinery behind them. Please help us reach more people with this analysis. Back to the final story. Now that David is king of Israel, Israel has many enemies. His armies are always at war. One day David is on rooftop of his house. Israel is not very rich place. These are palaces, they're just houses. David is strolling on his rooftop, and across from him is a woman named Bathsheba bathing naked. David is overcome with lust. He's king. He orders his servant to get her. She comes, they have sex. She gets pregnant. The problem, she was married to a man named Uriah the Hittite, one of David's best soldiers fighting for David and Israel somewhere else. David's like, this is problem, because once Uriah comes home and finds Bathsheba has new child, he's going to know it's not his. Either he's going to kill her or figure out it's David and come kill him. David, being very clever, has solution. He invites Uriah back home. Uriah comes home from war thinking, the king has called for me. Therefore it's emergency. He rushes back. David meets Uriah at his house and says, listen Uriah, you've been doing such great job. You're such great soldier. You're so loyal. I want to give you vacation. Go home and be with your wife. Uriah says, my king, my comrades are dying. They're starving out in battlefield. I cannot abandon them. How can I find pleasure in my wife when my friends are suffering? I refuse to go home. I will not go home until battle is won. David tries his best but can't convince Uriah to go home. David tells Uriah, you're such great soldier. You're so loyal. I'm so happy and proud you fight for me. He gives Uriah a letter to his general Joab. The letter instructs Joab to kill Uriah. Joab will send Uriah with his soldiers out in battlefield. Then at last minute, Joab will recall his soldiers, leaving Uriah by himself. The enemies will swarm Uriah and kill Uriah. That's what happens. Once Uriah is dead, David marries Bathsheba and they're about to have child together. David is visited by a prophet named Nathan. Nathan says to David, I want to ask you a question. David says, sure, go ahead. Nathan says, let's imagine there are two shepherds. There's rich shepherd with 100 sheep and poor shepherd with 2 sheep. There's traveler, foreign guest who comes in town, and rich shepherd wants to honor him with feast. Rich shepherd steals poor man's sheep to feed traveler. Who's in the wrong? David says, of course rich shepherd is in the wrong. He's indignant, angry. How could man be so unrighteous as to steal another man's sheep? Nathan says, you, David, are the rich shepherd. You have violated God's law. You are wrong. As punishment, God will take away your son, your child with Bathsheba. That's what happens. David goes into mourning. He is distraught, depressed, and writes a lot of poetry. This is very powerful story that has captured imagination of everyone for thousands of years, but it's complete spin. This is not what happened. How do we know? Nathan says to David, you have stolen man's wife. Therefore you're in the wrong. What's the problem with this logic? What is David's real crime? He killed Uriah. You've forgotten this fact. He killed Uriah. That's real crime. He slept with Bathsheba. That's bad. But it's much worse if you murder someone. Another question, why would he murder Uriah? Why not just talk to him honestly and say, Uriah, I'm sorry. I love your wife. I had sex with her. I'm sorry. Why did David have to get Uriah killed? Because the army is loyal to Uriah. Why would David fear Uriah? Because Uriah is popular, brave soldier just like David. David used his popularity to usurp throne from Saul. Therefore David thinks Uriah could do same thing to me. Therefore I have to get him killed. In other words, this Bathsheba thing must have come later to disguise the fact that David killed Uriah because he feared Uriah's popularity. You see how clever this story is? The historical truth must have been David feared Uriah's popularity and he needed to get rid of Uriah, so he concocted this plan. After he killed Uriah, he needed to explain to his army who loved Uriah why this happened. Then there was, "Oh, because I fell in love with his wife. I couldn't control myself. I'm just man. God is God. I'm man. I'm king. I can't be God. I can't control my emotions." But the irony, because David is working so hard to disguise his ruthlessness, he's creating very powerful literature. He created very powerful story that has captured imagination of readers for a long time. If you think a lot about story, it unleashes a lot of ideas in you. You have to ask yourself, what is man? What is God? Are we capable of controlling our emotions? In other words, this story is extremely well constructed that inspires you to imagine your own personal, emotional, and moral life. We call this literature. It's no coincidence that today the Jewish people are most creative people in the world. When you go to America for university, most of your professors are Jewish. Most of best thinkers in world are Jewish. These past 200 years there have been 3 revolutionary thinkers: Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, and Sigmund Freud. They're all Jewish, raised in Jewish tradition of asking deep questions about what it means to be human,